Welcome to my YouTube channel and to my train room. Some time ago I started building the station for Centerville. I put the kit together and got it situated, but I never did finish the area around it. Well, for this week's project I am going to rectify that. The first thing I need is some kind of platform from which passengers can embark on their trains. When looking for inspiration for detailing my passenger station, and particularly building some kind of a platform, I downloaded some pictures from the internet, and I found a lot of them included timber boardwalks. This one, that one is not clear what it is. I think it's probably asphalt or some other kind of pavement. That's another timber one, also timber boardwalk. That one I think is a more modern picture, so I discarded that one. Timber boardwalk, another timber boardwalk, and that one is also a timber boardwalk. That one, I only downloaded it because it was interesting. There's a masonry platform. That one is another timber boardwalk, as is that one. This one is pavement of some kind, maybe asphalt, maybe packed dirt, I don't know. Also, when I was looking through them, I noticed that very few of them had fences along the back, and that surprised me. Well, there's one that has posts just to stop cars from being driven onto it, but it has no railings. And there's a partial fence at one end of this one. And that's about it. Most of them are open. If I go back to the very last picture in my series, this one here, it has quite a wild hedge, and eventually I decided to go with that look for other reasons that I will describe later. Well, here is my station site. I built the main structure some time ago, but it's just been sitting here unfinished ever since. I think I wanted about this far back from the track, and having decided to do a timber platform, it's going to just butt into here, so it'll be the same level. Originally I thought that I would start by putting a piece of strip wood on top of the ends of the ties to make up the height, but now I've realised from the photographs that it's always further back, and that stands to reason too, because obviously they want to be able to replace ties, because that's standard maintenance procedure. So I'm going to have to scrape the ballast away to get a level surface to work from, and then touch it up again once I finish the job, but that's no big deal. I have one of my decapods here because they have the biggest footboards of any locomotive I own. Now all the platforms I've seen are slightly above rail level, so as long as I don't go up high enough to foul that, I should be okay. And then the brick base for the building might have to be shimmed up slightly to plane out with the basswood that I'm going to use for the platform. So let me go away, get organised, and I will be right back. Well, I have chipped away all the excess ballast with a chisel and vacuumed up all the mess. It wasn't difficult. So now I need to bring back my locomotive, measure the height of the footboard so that I don't have any clearance problems later. And yes, I know this is a millimeter ruler, but it's easy enough to translate. And the clearance is a little under 1/4 of an inch. Well, here is what it looks like with 1/8 inch spacers and 32nd inch sheet. There is plenty of clearance under the pilot, but it is still high enough to look reasonable above the rail. Of course, this plank doesn't go like that. I'm going to be cutting it into short pieces and putting it that way so the grain runs in the right direction, because I have to scribe it for individual boards as well. Well, I have my first strip glued in all the way along. I used 1/8 inch square strip wood, and to make it easier to bend it around the curve, I cut about 3/4 of the way through with a razor saw every 12 scale feet. I figure that's a reasonable length wood that the prototype might have been built out of. I also use the same 1/8 inch square strip wood as a spacer off the end of the tie, so it's parallel all the way along. I think I'm going to use 10-foot planks for the walkway, so I've drawn a line in here, a scale 10 feet from the front edge, just so I know where to put the second piece. What I've got to do next is get the second strip on, and that's going to need packing up in a few places because this is not quite flat, and in some places the ground cover is too high, so I'll have to shave the wood there and get it to sit approximately flat. So I now have the second strip also glued down. It's exactly the same as the first, except that the saw curves are on the outside instead of the inside. And then in front of the structure it runs hard up against the platform just to support shorter boards along there. It butts in here, and then at this end I decided that this area here wasn't wide enough to pull a baggage wagon around the end of the building, so I'm putting an extra 6-foot wide wooden extension down there. That second strip is still gluing because I had to get everything else in first and then do some more measurements. And then here, if you'll notice, the 1/8 inch strip had to be shaved down quite a bit to miss the top of the retaining wall and the ground cover. So as soon as this is set up, that'll be a simple matter of cutting the decking and gluing it in place. Well, I decided to add a centerpiece on all the 10-foot wide areas because I felt that with the 32nd inch basswood it might have warped once I got it wet with the stain. I didn't bother here where it's a lot narrower in front of the building, but I felt that a center support would have been desirable here. And then I came back and I sanded it because it was slightly humped. I don't want the middle one high. It can be marginally low, and then it will just fill the gap with glue, but as long as it doesn't stick up, because then it will mess the whole thing up. And I'm happy with that fit. I'm all ready to attach the planking. When it comes to scribing basswood sheet to make planks, a knife is no good. It will just cut it all the way through. So instead what I do is use the corner of an old razor saw blade. Even so, with a 32nd inch thick, it's very easy to cut it all the way through, and I did that on the first strip. And rather than mark it with a pencil, I start by plotting some parallel lines on a graphics package, print it out on a computer. It's a lot more accurate than I can draw it with a pencil, and a lot faster too. I just tape one piece to each end and use that as my guidelines. With this other sheet of basswood, I've cut some of it into individual strips. They approximate to an 8-inch board, and then the rest of it is scored, obviously the same size. So I have some narrow scored pieces, I have some wide scored pieces, and individual strips. So I'll be able to get some variation. It's not going to look too uniform. It's not going to look like I cheated. I started applying the decking at the benchwork section joint because I need to be able to take it apart again at some point to move this layout to another room. And every now and again I just cut a slightly tapered plank to allow for the curve, and then it's just a case of putting glue on the 3 stringers and then laying the boards on top. As I said, I'm using some quite large sections and some individual boards just so that it's not too uniform. And I just keep working my way along until I get to the other end. Because of the slight curve along here, each one is individually sized, so I'm just doing them one at a time. Once I'm happy with the fit, I just put a thin bead of glue along both stringers and put the board in place. And then I put my square against the edge, because I know that when I put the stringer in, I got it to fit snugly against the plastic edge of the structure. So if this ends up exactly over the top of that, I know I'm going to get a good fit. And then I've got to push it down. Of course, it's bowing up in the middle. I think if I was buying the basswood specifically for this project, I would buy it prescribed. Cost a little bit more, but it would save time and save the problem with the bowing up. Anyway, then I just leave my square on top of it as a weight, and then by the time I'm ready to attach the next one, it's hard enough not to bow up again. So I have all the decking glued on now all the way along. I had about 1 square inch left over of my wood, so it was a good estimate of how much I needed. I've still got to come back and do a little bit of cleaning up. There's a few ridges where the wood wasn't quite the same thickness all the way along, and along the front here it's not quite as even as I would like. It's high there as well, and I managed to break the end board off here as I was sanding that, so I'm going to let that set up. Tomorrow I will get it all stained and it will start to look like a wooden walkway. Well, the boardwalks are now ready for stain. The last step in the construction was with a sanding block with some very coarse sandpaper on it, rubbing in line with the grain to get rid of most of the unevenness and at the same time give them some texture. Next thing I'm going to do is stain them, and for that I'm going to use a wash of dark grey. This is apple barrel pavement grey, and it's something that I've used before. It's a pretty dark grey. Obviously I don't want the wood stained that dark, but I'm going to put a very thin wash so that some of the wood colour actually shows through. I used the offcut as a test piece and it was satisfactory. So now let's go. Actually, come to think about it, I need to get it down the front as well, so I'll do that first. And after doing a bit, wipe off the excess. And to me, that looks like weathered wood. Well, now that the building is situated, I need to get the driveway and landscape around it. You'll notice that there's a great big gap underneath it. I had to jack it up. The benchwork wasn't quite level at this point. I also needed some shims in the back. I've got shims of scrap styrene, 30 thou in the 2 corners and 20 thou in the middle. And then now it's perfectly flush with the boardwalk. Well, since this video is already getting long enough, I've decided I'm going to break it here. Next week I will continue with the process of detailing this area. So thanks for watching, have a great day, and I hope to see you again next week. Bye for now.